the Dark Enlightenment. Are you aware of this?
Yeah, I'm familiar.
It's something when I heard about it, I got quite frightened.
Well, the Dark Enlightenment, I think, is just a way of intellectualizing some of the social and cultural tendencies of fascism, right? Like the Dark Enlightenment, we're talking about like the IDW stuff, right? Like
Mhm.
the Dark Enlightenment posed by this like auteur group of elite intellectuals who the media doesn't want you to know about. And they're all either like Joe Rogan types, he's literally
Yeah.
called part of the IDW, which is hilarious. Or they're like people like Jordan Peterson, fascists with suits.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. It's the Dark Enlightenment is basically just like, I mean, what is it? Reject modernity. Men don't get married. I don't know. It's pretty
Yeah.
contradictory.
Anti-democratic and bringing back like a tech monarchy. And somebody who's a big fan of it, of course, is Peter
Peter
Thiel.
Thiel. Yeah, yeah. They're huge fans of this shit. It's basically like dorky fascism. It's from people who aren't, in my opinion, too like egocentric and not even smart enough to realize they're just pushing bog standard fascism. So a lot of them seem to think like, ah, no, I'm not a fascist, okay? I just think democracy has failed the people and the only way to move forward is to have a single, highly intelligent, technocratic leader. Me, 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 me. And then like, oh, then I will be able to lead the world to the, to the promised land. It's basically, it's like the megalomaniacs brand of fascism, which is why it'll never take off. Because most people aren't megalomaniacal. I
Yeah.
legitimately think the only people who that like messaging resonates with are Silicon Valley tech bros and like would-be cultists. The vast majority of people who are sympathetic to fascism are going to go down the traditional route, reject modernity, moral panic, degeneracy, blah, 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 blah. Only the most freakishly self-obsessed people like Peter Thiel are fit for that particular like avenue. That's why I actually don't talk about it that much. It's because, and this sounds like really condescending, but I do fully believe this. The kind of people who are susceptible to like dark enlightenment messaging, I think are basically cognitively fucked to begin with. Like their personality matrices might just incline them towards being bad people. Maybe that's not inherent, but like holy shit, they really lean into that, Like it's not, they are so far off from
Yeah.
like reality and being a good person that it's genuinely tough to imagine like getting them over.
It straight up looks like they went from Dungeons and Dragons to straight up monarchy LARPing.
No, literally, yeah, and they act and the way they talk is like a Dungeons and Dragons villain. When fascists talk, it's very humanistic in appearance, right? Like,
Mm.
we need to return to when people were happy, when men were men, when women were women. We need to reject all this, like this alienating modernity. It sounds humanistic. It's not, of course, but it sounds that way. Not so for the Dark Enlightenment shit. It's literally like the shepherd must cull the sheep. A wolf in sheep's clothing must not pretend forever. Like it's literally like anime villain. Like I am the only one who can bring about the utopia bullshit, and it's so
Yeah.
fucking funny to watch from afar. A lot of young guys are into that shit too, like 13-year-olds or whatever. So yeah.
Well, I'm glad that you don't take it seriously because I saw Curtis Yarvin. He's this leather-clad, chubby-cheeked, cherub-cheeked, just loser. I don't know. There's no other way to describe this guy.
I think the best way you can like one of the easiest ways I think you can hit on this is if you Google fascism, you get a lot of info. If you Google the Dark Enlightenment, you get a pull comp ball on the very top alongside a bunch of blog articles and charts, which all look like they come from like Hearts of Iron 4 lifers. And that's like the market for this sort of thing. Spotify Dark Enlightenment album by Dark Enlightenment. What do we got? Wait, hold on. Kill ghosts of the past. Haunting thoughts. No judgment. Still sleeping. Like you get what I'm talking about here, right? Like don't get me wrong, they're still fascists, right? Fascism's dangerous. It's just this is like the dorkiest wing of it.
Basement 14-year-old brooding poetry kind of fascism.
Yeah, no, 100%. These, like, 10, 15 years ago, these guys all would have been listening to Linkin Park or Evanescence. They all would have, like, incredibly thin self-harm marks running up and down their arms and legs. And they would all have, like, half-finished poetry in their school notebook about their mom and how they want her to die. It just, I mean, maybe they still do,
Yeah.
Maybe they're just that, but 30.
Yeah. Well, that's the one of the things is they don't grow up, obviously.
No, they really don't.
So what, Vaush, what do you think is the number one thing that we should be all worried about at this moment? What's on your mind, really?
Oh, democracy mostly,
Okay.
Democracy is the vessel through which you can affect political change non-violently. And despite what a lot of people say about me, that is my best hope for the future. The democratic systems in our country are deeply flawed, but they're also pretty darn resilient. And there are a lot of good people in this country who, if given the opportunity, I think will make the right choice. I think the majority of people in this country, if given the chance, will make the right choice. The problem is that there are like innumerable systemic failures that prevent them from realizing what the right choice is or from actually being able to do it. We're talking like voter disenfranchisement on one hand, and on the other hand, you have people who are just being fed like bad info. A lot of people don't understand how big a threat fascism poses. But if you laid this out on the table, if you gave everybody like the basic run of things, I think the majority of people, even a lot of Republican voters, would set on the right side of things. That's why fascists have to lie constantly, right? Like they're on the back foot in an empiricist sense because they need to lie in order to even, grasp a portion. Like they need to lie, to cheat, to steal, to grab power, to use authoritarianism, to censor, to cut into the schools, to silence their opposition in order to get a minority of the population to believe in them. The fact that we don't have to do that and still maintain a majority in a lot of critical cultural ways, that's not bad. I think that's nice. I think that's an avenue for positive change, potentially. So I'm hoping we're able to hold on to that.
You see that there's a push to privatize schools just with the rhetoric that's being pushed around now about whatever grooming. I don't see why people are so anti-hygiene. I groom every day. No, but people, but seriously, like,
This is what we get for making fun of metrosexuals.
Right. But I heard tearing apart Dingleberry McGee. I'm not even going to say his name, Shapingo. It sounds like with what he's saying, he's also passing this transphobic, homophobic stuff, but he's also pushing for the privatization of schools. How do we quell the radicalization of all these fanatics on the right with this Q bullshit?
Well, they're terrified of young people because Gen Z came out in 2022 and like came out there with like a massive point advantage for Democrats. There were Republicans saying we need to raise the voting age. There were Republicans saying like Gen Z people aren't actually Americans. The thing is, like, at the end of the day, proximity is the greatest weapon against reactionary thought. If you grow up around Black people, Hispanics, Asians, gays, trans people, Jews, whatever, you're far more likely to be tolerant of them because when you live next to a person, you realize they're just regular people, and you're less susceptible to propaganda which describes them as some kind of like existential threat. This is the case everywhere all the time. It's why cities are less racist than rural areas. Diversity, people in immigrant communities tend to be less racist. It's a common racist message, you would hate Black people too if you had to live around them. The data says otherwise. The more you live around literally any group of people, the more likely you are to love them. And with that in mind, I think what they're afraid of is the fact that the modern like Gen Z, the modern like young people are the only generation in American history to have ever grown up next to out gay and trans people. And that really threatens the panic they're trying to sow right now. Because all the shit they say about trans and gay people being threats to children resonates real great with 70-year-old boomers in the suburbs and really poorly with 20-year-olds who grew up and went to school with gay and trans children who they got along with. It's very difficult to explain to those people, oh yeah, actually they're all existential threats, So I think the goal right now, that's why they're pushing for homeschooling, why they're pushing for private schooling, and why they're doing everything they can to ban any expression of or any like teaching of like queer stuff in schools. It's why they oppose any kind of medical intervention for young trans people, because trans people are more likely to stay in the closet until they can get some kind of medical intervention, and they don't want out trans people in high school, because all these things contribute to adjacency, and adjacency for young people means less likely to feed into the modern, right-wing bias, the moral panic they're doing. So that's the threat. That's what they're doing. But man, does it not reek of desperation to you that they have to do all this just to prevent just like everything, just to keep like people from interacting with each other?
Sure.